France will not be sending their best players south for the July test next year in what would have been one of the most amazing series we've seen in recent years, New Zealand against France. That would be absolutely box office. That's the sort of test series that would make me travel south to go and watch it. We're not going to get the biggest names because France will not be sending their best players. That is a story which has caught fire just in the last day or so, since France made an official announcement confirming that they're going to keep their policy of sending development teams for the next 2 years at least. And that was brought to my attention by Will Kelleher, a man I know well, who I've worked with, Times rugby journalist, and he's pointed out that France are taking a second-string team to New Zealand next summer, or July, and New Zealand officials are livid about it, as it, means they're not going to have the biggest names. It's going to be harder to market it, especially as France have announced this a full year ahead of time. It says, Rugby eats itself, exhibition 1,890. I understand the frustration. This has led to quite a big reaction. A lot of people to say things like, this is why France don't win World Cups. This is why Antoine Dupont can never be regarded as the GOAT because he refuses to travel south. I think there's a lot more nuance than is just being given in Will Kelleher's reporting of it and in the top line reaction to it. And that's what I want to get into on this video. And I'd be really interested to know your thoughts as well. So please get stuck in the comments down below. Drop a thumbs up on the video. It doesn't take you any time or cost you anything. Really helps. And I'd appreciate it. Same as I'd love it if I would earn your subscription on this video. So yeah, let's talk about this then, because yeah, as I say, I would love to see the best players playing against the best players. I had an amazing time, as you can see on the channel, from my time in South Africa watching the Ireland test matches. These North v South matchups in July can be absolutely brilliant. The England series in New Zealand was really good value. Wales against Australia was quite good fun as well. New Zealand against France next year could be so good. Yeah, shame. But I just want to, and this has all come from this official announcement from France. I just want to pick up on the fact that New Zealand rugby officials have apparently said they are livid. Are they livid? And Will Kelleher has said, Rugby eats itself, exhibition 1,890. All of that makes it sound like this is new information. If you're surprised or shocked, and therefore if you're overly upset by this, I'd suggest you haven't been paying attention, because this is only France continuing what they've been doing for the last at least 15 years. Every single July, this is what they do. Reason being, the top 14 final is at the very end of June. The July test matches are the next weekend. And therefore, the teams involved in the top 14 final, you cannot rightly expect to get on a plane, travel to the other side of the world and play just a few days later at the end of their domestic season, which starts in August, I think. The French season starts in August. It ends at the very end of June, basically July. It's a 9.5, 10-month season. What do you expect? The same people that are getting quite upset about, oh, this is livid, this is wrong, this shouldn't happen, are the same people that will tell you rugby players are playing too much and they need to rest. It's just a fact. Look at the names on this team sheet. This is actually, it's quite hard to read, isn't it? I'll just tell you some of the names. This is the Bordeaux and Toulouse teams that contested the top 14 final this year, and you will see the names, unsurprisingly, of Malvaca, Flamont, Roumain, Crow, Dupont, Ntamak, Ramos. I mean, there's just a handful from Toulouse, and then you've got Penaud and Luku and Deportier and Moafana from Bordeaux, Bielbiere, and the list goes on. A massive proportion of the French national team is within these two sides. So if they are in the top 14 knockout stages and the final, you cannot expect these players to play a week later on the other side of the world. As much as I would love that to happen, I guess what I'm getting at here is this is part of a much bigger conversation, and just being livid at France is not addressing the root issues that rugby has, which is we need to get a blank bit of paper out and work all this out so that we can move forward and get the matchups that we want. But being surprised and upset at France now is completely futile and hasn't been paying attention, because this is not new news. Like I say, this is not new. Earlier this summer, France took a B-side to Argentina. By the way, an Argentina team which was stacked with most of their internationals. Actually, here's a point. Let me go back a page. in the top 14 final for Toulouse, Juan Cruz Malia, Santiago Chocobares, 2 brilliant players for Argentina. They didn't play for Argentina in the next couple of weeks against France. So the Argentina coaches know that it's not something the players can do. Should we be annoyed at Felipe Contepomi that he didn't pick Malia and Chocobares? No, it makes total sense. Anyway, in that series, it was 1-1. France, their second string, beat Argentina. And except for Malia and Chocobares, it was a full-strength Argentina that would go on and beat South Africa. Well, a second-string South Africa, but would beat New Zealand. It would beat a fully loaded New Zealand. So be careful about being too livid about the France team that they're sending south next summer, because they might just end up beating New Zealand. I wouldn't put it past them. But they went to Argentina this year. They went to Japan in 2022. In 2021, they went to Australia. And their second string, actually, that series in 2021 was amazing. Each match was within 2 points. So it was great. 2018, they took a second string to New Zealand and lost 3-0. Same to South Africa in 2017. They went to Argentina in 2016. They went to Australia in 2014. They went to New Zealand in 2013, and the list goes on. This is not new. This is what France do and have done since, I think, 2008. I think this has been their policy. And the reason is because the top 14 is massive business. And I think what isn't being said here and what needs to be understood, especially if you're outside of France, I'm really into my French rugby. I have a whole other rugby channel, FR UK Rugby, which focuses just on French rugby. So if you love your French rugby, go and check that out, FR UK Rugby. But, so I live in Manchester in England, where football is the #1 sport by a country mile. And if you asked your average Man City or Man United fan or any Premier League fan in England, would you rather your team win the Premier League or Champions Cup or both, or England win the World Cup? I'm pretty confident the majority, probably vast majority, would pick their club team doing well. Whereas if you asked rugby fans the same question, they would overwhelmingly say they want England to win the World Cup. And I think that's what it's like for most rugby countries. New Zealand rugby fans would want New Zealand to win the World Cup before they would want the Blues to win Super Rugby. South African fans would want the Boks to win another World Cup before they would want the Bulls to win the Champions Cup. That's just the way rugby is in almost every part of the world, except in France, where the top 14 is, for many, many French rugby fans, #1. That's not to say they don't care about their national team. They absolutely do. We saw how heartbroken they were when they went out in their own home World Cup quarter-final against South Africa by a point, in, by the way, one of the greatest games of rugby we've ever seen. So they want their team to win, and they get right behind their team. And La Marseillaise being belted out in a stadium before a match is just the passion. You can feel it. So they're very passionate about their national team. They love their club sides in a way that other rugby fans around the world cannot begin to understand in many cases. Having been to South Africa, I can actually see there's the passion that there is for the teams in some parts of South Africa is massive as well. But for the most part, and in most parts of the world, and there's obviously huge fans of Leinster and Gloucester and Leicester and all these other teams in Europe, I get that. But it's on another level in France. It's on another level that you cannot fathom. It's more like football. And what that's led to is a league, that passion that French fans have for their domestic league and their local club and their town and all the rest of it. That's led to a domestic league which is kicking the backsides of every other domestic league in the world. It's making more money than any other league in the world by a mile, which is why, and let's just take, in fact, it's useful, as it's the last team they played, it's useful to mention Argentina. Argentina, great national team. They do not have a professional domestic league structure. So, of the team that played against the France second string, I made a note of this, 10 of the players are paid to play in the top 14. So without the top 14, Argentina don't have a national team that competes in the Rugby Championship and at World Cups. World Rugby needs the top 14 cash and the money that they generate in order to pay so many professional players from around the world. World Rugby would be in a much, much worse place were it not for the top 14. I think I've kind of hammered that point now. So to then expect them to release their best players at the crucial part of the season, it's not going to happen. This is a much, much bigger conversation that rugby has to address. This global season, those July test matches, they work for English teams, they work for Irish teams, and all the rest of it. It doesn't work for French teams because of the top 14. So what's the solution? I actually did a video recently talking about how I'm worried that the Champions Cup is plummeting in relevance and importance and popularity, and maybe getting rid of that in the next few years when the next TV deal comes up, I think 2030. If that ends up going, that frees up 8 weekends in the season, which means the top 14 could be shorter, which means that we could have these matches between France and New Zealand. At the moment, we don't have it, and I actually understand it. Just to put it in context about just how well the French domestic league is doing at the moment, Courtney Lawes, who, if he was still playing, he should be playing for England. If he was still eligible to play for England, which he should be, because England should change the laws, every other country should change the laws, New Zealand should change the laws and all the rest of it. Anyway, that's another conversation altogether, part of this bigger conversation. But if Courtney Lawes was still available, he would be the second best blindside flanker in the world behind Peter Steph du Toit only. He is playing in the French second division, and last weekend, or the weekend before last, when they were last at home, he played at home in front of a crowd of 15,000 people in the French second division. They have 3 professional leagues. It's in rude health. And you're not just going to get French rugby to mess about with that because it's what pays all of their players' wages. It's what pays to keep them in France and keep rugby thriving. It helps the national team more than it hurts it. So I don't know what the solution here is, but I know that being livid at France is not really a rational perspective because this is how it's always been. If you're really that livid, New Zealand rugby, get yourself round a table and thrash out with France and with England and with South Africa and with all these other countries, thrash out a global season which no one has been able to manage to sort in nearly 30 years of professional rugby. Get it sorted, and then we can have these great games. Until then, until you sort out your global season and get everything in alignment, you're not going to solve it. And throwing your toys out the pram and getting annoyed at the top 14 finishing when it does, it is not going to help anyone. So I'm as frustrated as anyone that France can't play New Zealand next summer with their first choice team. I would also say their second team is going to be pretty good nonetheless. So don't kick up too much of a stink, Kiwi fans, because it could end up biting you in the backside next year. It's not Antoine Dupont's fault that his domestic league and the people that pay his wages, the tournament finishes at the end of June, and the World Rugby decide to have their international window start 1 weekend later. What could World Rugby do to help that situation if they're so keen to have the best players there? There's got to be someone has got to give a little bit somewhere. Maybe it's getting rid of the Champions Cup in 4 years' time, and then there's more free weekends and all the rest of it. But this is not quite the story and the news. It's certainly not news. I think that's how I'd summarise it. This is not news. This is how it's always been. And until actual people that are running rugby get their heads around a table and bang some heads together, it's not going to change either. Those are my thoughts. I would love to know yours. Tell me what you think. Leave your comment down below. Give the video a thumbs up. Hit subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.